Nandana Vrajajana Ranjana Shudanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Shudanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jamuna Tira Vanachari Nachari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Radha Madhava Bihari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janababa Girivardhari Gopi Janababa Hari Gopi Janabalapa Girivardhari Gopi Janabalapa Girivardhari Yashodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Shudanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Shudanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Vanacha Jamuna Tira Vanachari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Bolo Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Gaur Premanandi. Thank you for this harmonium. Well, it is wonderful to be here. I think the last time I was here was, 7, 8, 9 years ago. I can't really remember. But I remember when I was here, I was giving a Bhagavatam class, and everything was going fine until I looked up and I noticed what is still there is a huge statue of my master, Garuda. So I actually thought I was seeing things because I'd never really seen a Garuda that big ever anywhere. So I'm having a wonderful sort of recollection of that. But first I'd like to thank the organizers of this conference, of this gathering, of this festival with whom I worked initially, which was Nisringananda and Devala. So I thank them very much. And I'm honored to be in front of so many old friends and revered Vaishnavas and Vaishnavis. And now let's get right down to my topic, which I'm not sure I understand fully. We're not here to discuss, delicate issues of interpretation, mimamsa hermeneutics, the nuances of fine, commentary, bhashya writing. This is not what we're here to do today. And I'm not mentioning challenges in the understanding of Prabhupada's words as something that's bad, although it could appear that way. I'm actually proposing that challenges in understanding Prabhupada's words is a good thing, is a valuable thing. As a Kanishta devotee, I might say, I know exactly what Prabhupada is saying, and I don't need to know much more. As a Kanishta, I'm very firm in my understanding of Prabhupada's words. As a Madhyama, I'm thinking, well, I think I understand. Let's deliberate. Let's ponder. Let's reflect. Let's look a little carefully. Let's look at the context of Prabhupada's words. And as an Uttama Bhakta, I might say, I know so little about what Prabhupada's saying, and I thirst for so much more. And then we share that with one another. We also can share, as Madhyamas, we can also share, we can ponder, we can look at different instances of ideas that Prabhupada presents. But as a Kanishta, there's not much room for dialogue. They know. They know exactly what Prabhupada said and what Prabhupada meant. So today, I'm so gratified to be in the midst of so many devotees whom I love and have known for so many years, and ones I've never known, but their faces are so bright and so filled with love for community and Prabhupada and all the gifts that he gave us that are frankly incomprehensible. So today what I'd like to do is I'd like to leave you with a portrait of Prabhupada, one that I just came up with, one that I think might be valuable. And like any portrait, it cannot possibly capture the whole person. We have many portraits of Prabhupada. In fact, we have thousands upon thousands of photographs, maybe tens of thousands, and no one photograph is going to capture Prabhupada. We have many, of course, sacred presentations of him three-dimensionally. And again, can anything really capture Prabhupada fully? So I'm making initially a disclaimer here. Okay, my portrait is not claiming to contain everything, but I think that I hope that I can paint a little bit of a beautiful portrait of Prabhupada for you today, and for you to take something away with this portrait. A little bit of a different portrait than perhaps any of you have heard before. And then before the time is up, and I believe I have till 11:30, is that correct? Yes, Mr. Anandaji is confirmed. So that is also time for us to come together and discuss and bring up any reactions and ideas and so on. I'd also like to thank all the people that have put this festival together. Swavasji, who is allowing me once again back into his temple. Thank you, Swavasji. I actually was concerned. I asked him if, I came up to him very sincerely. I said, was the bomb threat due to the bombers knowing that I was going to be talking this morning? And he assured me that it was not. And of course, he was lying to me, I know. So anyway, but to be here in LA is just such a privilege for me, because this is the heartbeat of Prabhupada's book production and distribution. And as Prabhupada says in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, the purpose of ISKCON is for the writing, publishing, and distributing books. And I mean, this is one of Prabhupada's very bold phrases. And so I want to speak from my experience and show you how I'm painting this portrait of Prabhupada today. And am I too loud or too soft? I should be a little softer. Okay, good. So, I think I can say with some confidence that I have used Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita in the classroom for more than anyone else has ever done. I think over 2 decades, well over 2 decades, teaching as a professor, and while undergoing the tapasya of graduate schools for years. Many of you have known me in the past. It took me a very long time to get finished, but I finally did. So throughout my academic training and my professional life as a professor, I'm very familiar with Prabhupada's Gita in the context of academics. And in fact, for years, after using Prabhupada's Gita for so many years and continuing to use the Gita, I was actually moved to write, translate, and comment on a Bhagavad Gita that I felt could be a bridge over into Prabhupada's Gita. Many people, all you have to do is go on to Amazon and see that there are objections sometimes to Prabhupada's way of translating. I like to show that in the end, Prabhupada is absolutely right on target. Prabhupada sometimes would be a little impatient. And you see yoga in the word for word, and in the translation you see devotional service. Now, my academic colleagues who trained me at Harvard would probably look at me askance if I did the same. But Prabhupada was the impatient one. He wanted us to arrive at the perfection of bhakti as soon as possible. And you can feel that urgency in his Gita translation. And it's very powerful. And it's particularly powerful for those of us who really are ready to go on that path. But others who are not ready, it feels a little rushed, a little pushed, and therefore they'll complain that yoga does not mean devotional service, but actually it does. See, this is the issue. So So here's my portrait. My portrait of Prabhupada is based on a new way of appreciating the Bhagavad Gita. And in fact, all my paints for this portrait, all my brushes and paints come from the Bhagavad Gita. And what I see in this portrait of Prabhupada is an embodiment of what Krishna is doing in the Gita. And here's the journey, a little bit of the journey that I took when writing this and translating this publication for HarperCollins. I observed that there really are essentially two levels on which Krishna is speaking to Arjuna. Now, I will have to admit to all of you that for years, I used to just kind of skip over the first chapter. I mean, why do I need to hear Arjuna and his, plight? And why do I need to hear his, all his despair and agony? I hear enough of that elsewhere and so on. I don't need to go through this. Let's just get right to chapter 2, verse 12. Right? That's where, so many of us have gone. We go to chapter 2, verse 12. Never will there be a time when you, nor I, nor all these kings ever cease to exist, nor will we ever cease to be, and so on. And this is the place to start reading the Gita. So for years, I was actually going to suggest to Swavas that we edit out the first chapter. But I never had the courage, and I'm not sure why I even said it now. But more and more, I realized how precious this first chapter is. Krishna only speaks a few words of a single verse in the first chapter. Just a few words. The first part is pretty much Sanjaya's narrative, quoting Duryodhana for 9 verses, as you all know, and the very first verse is that very important seed verse, bija verse from Dhritarashtra. So what I've learned is that this, had Arjuna not gone into a place of despair and hopelessness due to an irresolvable ethical dilemma, we would not have the teachings of the Gita today. So I suggest, of course, to temple leaders and ISKCON leaders that we should have more problems to precipitate more wonderful teachings. Now, aside from my facetiousness, sometimes I wonder what would happen if Arjuna were a member of ISKCON. Would he be taken care of? Would there be a devotee amidst us who would have maybe not a Kripa Sindhu? That's a lot. An ocean of grace, right? Kripa Sindhu, Vanchakalpa, Tarubhyascha, right? Kripa Sindhu. I'm happy for a pond. Even a puddle would be nice. Because Krishna's grace through the devotee is powerful. So even a pond would be lovely. Sometimes I think we run away from those who have problems. Sometimes we expect perfection in each other, and we don't know how to embrace each other in a loving spirit that means a whole package deal. It's a whole package deal. When we love, it means I accept everything about you, your strengths, your weaknesses, and I embrace you, and I want to know you more. And embrace says 2 things. I accept you fully, and I want to know you more. This is the embrace that Krishna gives Arjuna. This is the embrace that Prabhupada has given to us. Let me keep painting this portrait. What I realized is that to understand the philosophical content of the Bhagavad Gita, apart from the narrative and the personal interactions between Krishna and Arjuna is to have a faulty understanding of the philosophy. I'll give you an example. One day a professor, colleague of mine, came up to me and said, Graham, he loves the Bhagavad Gita, right? He comes up to me and says, Graham, I just was thinking about the Bhagavad Gita and I've got it. The Bhagavad Gita really preaches that there's no free will. It's all deterministic. You know, the gunas, the trigunya, we're helplessly being tossed around and thrown around by the gunas. And really, there is no free will. Conditioning dominates us, and there's no choice. There's no free will. And I said, George, I think I understand why you're saying this. But if you understand what's going on in the relationship between Arjuna and Krishna, in the 18th chapter, in the 63rd verse, when Arjuna is fully knowledgeable of his situation, he's fully knowledgeable of the true self and transcendence. He's now fully knowledgeable of what a soft and beautiful heart he has to offer to Krishna. He then says, now act as you so choose. So it is not a book, I explained to George, that is fully deterministic and fatalistic, as you are proposing here. What I realized from that is that the scholarly world takes the philosophical content of the Gita and divorces it from the personal interactions between Krishna and Arjuna. This was such a light that went off in me. And I think we do that too with Prabhupada. Perhaps. Maybe you don't agree. Let me paint further here, even further. When Prabhupada writes the law books for the next 10,000 years, when he writes the books, he presents the books, he's bold, he's firm. He sets the highest levels of practice. He establishes the highest philosophical visions. And he's very firm, he's very bold. But we have thousands of letters from Prabhupada that are testimonials of Prabhupada interacting with each one of us when he was so kind in guiding, so understanding, and so loving, and so sensitive to what we needed, whether it needed some bold sort of correction. And Rameshwarji was so kind this morning to take me to Prabhupada's room and share with me how he would correct Rameshwar when he would say some things, but he did it obviously in a loving way. He appreciated, and I know when Rameshwar was telling me this, that he felt loved by Prabhupada. To feel loved by the devotee is absolutely necessary. Sometimes Prabhupada can appear unloving and so bold and so strict, with so much expectation in his presentation in the books. But when you look at the way he interacted with each of us and how so understanding and loving and even, you might say, apparently compromising, it just, how do you put the two together? So this is the Kripa Sindhu. This is the Kripa Sindhu. Even in the video we heard this morning of Prabhupada, in Prabhupada's class, he was saying that my godbrothers may criticize. I am marrying so many devotees. I'm initiating the couples and so on. On the one hand, I think Prabhupada had, in the book that Tamal Krishna wrote for his dissertation that I finished for him and was published by Oxford University Press, there is this kind of tension that I think Tamal was dealing with, is, the expectations of his godbrothers on the one hand, and on the other hand, the practical, loving interaction between himself and his disciples. Let's go back to the Gita. I discovered things in the Gita that were there in Prabhupada's books, was always there in the text, but it never sort of became amplified to me until I ended up translating the Gita. What became apparent to me is Krishna gives us little clues throughout the Gita that all of these things are accomplished. All of these complex practices and teachings that are given throughout the Gita. And no doubt the Gita is a complex text, very complex. But the last words that Krishna speaks in the Gita, chapter 18, verse 72, goes something like this. And it's in the form of a rhetorical question, which means this is an instruction. He asks Arjuna, have you heard this whole teaching with thought focused on the single highest point? Ekagra, eka agra, single, eka agra, summit, single highest point. When I read this, I said, so what is the single highest point? Then I also came to know of, Sanjaya's characterization of Krishna's whole teaching in verse 1875, where he characterizes it by saying, Guhyam Param Yogam, the supreme secret of yoga. Now, these are not just, flowery words to embellish, a philosophical teaching. These are words that are very deliberate. And certainly the rhetorical question that Arjuna received, have you heard this whole teaching, all that I've given you, with thought focused on the single highest point? I began wondering, well, have I missed something here? What would that single highest point be? And so, as I kept going through the Gita, I came across R.C. Zahner's translation and interpretation of the Gita, put up by Oxford University Press. He was an Oxford professor back in the mid-20th century, and he kind of poisoned the West about the Gita. He said that the 11th chapter was the climactic chapter, when Krishna is showing his Virata Rupa, and this is the great might and power of the divine. This is where the Gita really goes, and then things wind up gradually. What a silly and misleading interpretation. Who puts the climactic event of a story in the middle? I mean, really, who does that? You save the climactic event, right, toward the end. So, and in fact, I was once invited on a blog about the Bhagavad Gita. And I don't usually entertain these things, but I said, okay, well, for 1 week, I'll entertain any questions about the Gita. And the moderator of the Gita posed a question to me, because I said, ask me anything. Ask me anything. He said, well, it seems to me, Dr. Schweig, it seems to me that, the 11th chapter of the Gita is like the ultimate culminating event of the whole Gita, the whole message, and the 12th chapter sort of rounds and winds things up. And as far as I'm concerned, and I gasped when he said this, you can get rid of the other 6 chapters that follow. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. He was laughing like that, and I was gasping like this. Exactly. And so here I had to really understand, why was the Gita proceeding with 6 more chapters? Well, we all know, but the idea is that the 11th chapter, if you carefully read it, is anticlimactic. As you all know, Krishna says, I will show you my most precious form, which is the intimate form that's been before you the whole time. The Virata Rupa, yes, it's special vision and so on. I gave you special vision to be able to see it, but that's ultimately not the highest. What has been right in front of you this whole time is the most precious thing, which is really quite a message in and of itself. The climactic message of the Gita is in the 18th chapter, right where you would expect it. And I discovered that there is a great secret, a greater secret, and the greatest secret of all. These are Krishna's terms. And I discovered that the first 50 verses were the great secret and had to do with the outer world and acting according to one's dharma. Acting with heart in everything that you do in the world. Essentially, devotional service. But he moves toward the greater secret, which is to understand transcendence, the true nature of the self, and then the greatest secret of all, which goes beyond jnana, which goes beyond karma, and goes beyond bhakti, because it is a necessary precondition for bhakti to be there in the first place. He explains in 1864, Sarva guyatamam bhuya shrinu me paramang vachaha ishtosi me dhritam iti tato vakshyami tehatam. He says, and by the way, I looked at every verse in the Gita. There is no verse in the Gita that is so emphatic, so insistent, so dramatic. And with Sanskrit, we don't have, uppercase letters, double strike, bold face, smiley faces. We don't have that. We don't have the smiley faces. We don't have that in Sanskrit. If you're going to say it, you've got to say it. You've got to express it. And there's no verse that is so insistent and so powerful as this one verse. The greatest secret of all. So this is not just a superlative, it's a double superlative or a super superlative. The greatest secret of all greatest secrets. Sarva guyatamam. Shrinu, bhuya shrinu. Hear it once again. In other words, I've been saying this in little subtle ways throughout the whole Gita. So hear it once again, the second level of emphasis. And if that weren't enough, paramang vachaha, my supreme message. It's pretty insistent. Can you imagine getting a text from someone like that on your phone? I mean, this is pretty urgent. And if that weren't enough, he puts it in quotation marks. Quotation marks, and it's an iti clause. And he says, Ishtosi me dhritam. He finally just comes out and says it. He says, you are so much loved by me. There's no small print. I'll love you if you follow my instructions. I'll love you if you do this and do that. People throw this phrase around, unconditional love, all the time. But unconditional love is only possible by an unconditioned being. That would be God. And that's where we find unconditional love. And we can find that and experience that and feel that through Srila Prabhupada. That is what we're here to celebrate, in my limited view here. The portrait I'd like to leave you with is that, like Krishna, while he was giving all these teachings, very complex teachings, the Sanskrit is not that difficult in the Gita as it is in the Bhagavata, other texts, but the concepts, the teachings are subtle and deep, and the Sanskrit is deceptively simple. But while he's delivering all of that, he's delivering it with this motive, this divine yearning for our hearts. And he's telling Arjuna, I will wait an eternity for you to turn to me. In my own, at least in my own experience, I think that's what I experienced from Prabhupada. He will wait until I get it together. He's there. His teachings are there. He sacrificed everything. And those of us here with whom he dealt with on a very personal basis, we have many here, Dayanandaji, who began this temple, and of course we got Rameshwarji and so many others here. You can experience that in those dealings, but you can experience it just on a daily basis in one's bhakti seva. Of course, I have a vivid portrait of Prabhupada. I remember going to the first big festival, the Mayapur festival, and I went on many wonderful morning walks with Prabhupada. Back then, you had to kind of sneak onto the morning walks if you weren't carrying a stick. That's the way it was back then, you know. But then we all moved to Vrindavan, and the temple was only just a pile of brick columns. Prabhupada's quarters were finished. And I remember we went to Fogel Ashram, which is down the road toward town a little bit. There's some ashram. I don't know if it's still there. Is it still there? Yeah. So in the morning, it was very dark. Prabhupada would give class in the morning. I remember Yadavarji's film was shown to Prabhupada one of those mornings, or was it night? Anyway, I'm conflating some of this, but anyway, we were all at Fogel Ashram, and I came to Bhagavatam class, and I was maybe slightly same distance as some of you up front here, where Prabhupada was sitting, but he was sitting up rather high, quite a high platform for Prabhupada, and there was only one devotee sitting between me and Prabhupada, but I could see over him to Prabhupada. And then during the middle of class, Prabhupada looked over to Brahmananda and said, "What is he doing?" And Prabhupada was pointing to me. And I was kind of feeling a little self-conscious, as you can imagine, right in the middle of Bhagavatam class. And Prabhupada said, "He is sleeping." I'm thinking, am I sleeping and I don't know it? Well, many of you don't know me that well, but I do that a lot. Walking, sitting, I'm sleeping. I could be sleeping right now, and you would not know it. So Prabhupada said to Brahmananda, he said, "Go over and tell him to go and sleep." So Brahmananda is walking over toward me. And if any of you have known Brahmananda, you don't want Brahmananda to walk over to you. Upon that order, with that order. So I'm like, I am absolutely devastated. And he stops at the devotee in front of me. Now, back in the early days, when we used to have Bhagavatam class, back in the early days, devotees were so stretched in services all over the place, right? I mean, it was not that uncommon for devotees to... In fact, one temple, a religious group, came up with the idea of a spray bottle. And we used to spray we used to either spray one another, or sometimes the brahmacharis were really intense. They would spray themselves, like over and over, and they'd be dripping. We had very dedicated brahmacharis back then. But it wasn't uncommon for devotees they were really exhausted. I mean, it wasn't because they were inattentive and not devoted. It was they were maybe too devoted in some sense. But so, here I thought maybe I was nodding out and just didn't even know it, but I learned something from that. Even though it was intended, Brahmananda was not intended for me, at least directly, and Prabhupada was not talking about me. Prabhupada, in that whole little scenario, taught me to be so attentive to what he was saying, to always be attentive, and to hear what he has to say, and to not simply pluck things out of context, or to use Prabhupada's words to fight with other Prabhupada's words coming from another person, but rather to come together in the challenge of understanding Prabhupada, in the complexity of what he gave us, in the depth of the gifts that he gave us, to come together in loving, caring Sangha, to celebrate what Prabhupada gave us, and to go deeper into what Prabhupada actually gave us. This is what I delight in doing every day. I have this incredible profession of going to work and teaching Bhagavad Gita. And they pay me for it. I mean, it's just quite amazing. I mean, I was going to ask Swavas if he would pay me for today, and he said no. He said, absolutely not. No, I just made that up because I just love Sava so much that I just have to pick on him a little bit. But it's just truly, and I'm not teaching that, I'm teaching yoga, the philosophy and practice of yoga. And I get to show them how the Yoga Sutra is actually secretly all about bhakti, but no one knows it. And so I'm publishing this now with Yale University Press and coming and showing that our bhakti process is there in the Yoga Sutra. And do you know what is common to both the Yoga Sutra and the Bhagavad Gita? This portrait that I'm talking about of Prabhupada, the ability to be sensitive to others, the ability to attend and be sensitive to the thoughts and feelings of others. Just because we have these great gifts from Prabhupada doesn't mean that we should ignore what others have to say when they come and inquire. We should listen to them. Where are they coming from? What are they about? What is their story? How did you end up here? It doesn't always work out, especially in the old days. I remember sitting down with someone at the Sunday feast back in, I think, 72, 73. And I said, hello, is this your first time here? He said, not really. I said, oh, that not really seemed to be a strange answer. I said, my name's Garuda. I said, what's your name? He said, my name is God. I said, your name is what? He said, my name is God. I lit up and I said, I have been looking for you for lifetimes. I said, I want to hang out with you forever. Now, those were the old days. That was back in the, in the old times. And I'm sure, I'm looking at Dayananda here. I think he has about 50 of those kind of experiences, probably right here in this temple. And, back in the early 70s and later, it got a little normalized, but God would show up occasionally at different temples. And even if someone says they're God, find out just what makes them tick in such a crazy way. Just be sensitive to. Because in that way, we can also be respectful of Prabhupada's gifts. We can be careful not to just unload Prabhupada's gifts carelessly and thoughtlessly, and even in an intimidating way onto others. That is not only disrespectful and insensitive to the person with whom we're interacting, but it's also disrespectful of the gift. You've got an emerald, you got a $50 million emerald, and you throw it at someone. Who does that with an emerald? No, you carefully place it in a setting, in a beautiful setting. It's up to us to create that setting. It was Krishna himself that gave the setting of loving, of the sweet loving nature, this divine loving nature in which he placed the jewels of the teachings of the Gita. Prabhupada gave us the teachings of the Vaishnava Sampradaya in such a loving setting. Let's not forget about that. Let's make sure that we do that with one another and that we include both. That we include both always. And that we never overlook the idea that there's something valuable that another has to offer, no matter who he or she may be. Remember, Krishna's in their heart. Prabhupada talked this morning about Chaitya Guru. You think that Prabhupada is not trying to talk to us through someone else's heart? You think that Krishna's, even with God, when I met God, Krishna was, anyway, that gets theologically complicated. I don't know how to talk about Krishna and this person's God and so on. But anyway, the point is that even with him, find out what's really in his heart. Do a lot of listening. That's what I love about the first chapter of the Gita. Krishna just listened. I'm not sure we hear one another enough. Even though that's the first process, Shravanam, hearing one another. Krishna practices Shravanam at a supreme level in the first chapter of the Gita. So while I used to skip the first chapter and go to the second, now all I read is the first chapter. That's not exactly accurate, but the point is that I have a special affection for the first chapter in a way that I never did. It was Prabhupada, in the portrait that I have of Prabhupada, that makes me appreciate what Krishna was doing in the first chapter, because he did it with us. He listened to us. He put up with us. And he allowed us to come at any level. He never said, you have to be perfect. He never said, you have to do everything perfectly right away. He gave us huge shoes to step in, to perform devotional service. He gave us the shoes of an Uttama Bhakta. And when we couldn't perform as Uttama Bhaktas, he was always so loving and kind. And like I said earlier, sometimes he even appeared to be stretching the rules, so to speak. But he only did this because he knew that it wasn't perfection that we should expect of one another, but direction. As long as we're going in the right direction, we should never be expecting perfection of one another. It's unreasonable to expect perfection. Too often we're expecting perfection of someone else, not ourselves. So we have to be careful with that. Prabhupada, then, in the portrait that I have of Prabhupada, is on the one hand an incredibly soft, loving, caring, compassionate teacher, while he gave us the very strict, bold gifts of the Vaishnava philosophy and practice. And I think to see those two at the same time are just as necessary as it was for me to show George that the Gita is not fatalistic. It is not a deterministic philosophy. It is not this steely, cold philosophy where you have absolutely no choice and you're completely destined to perform in life according to your condition and be hopelessly enslaved to that conditioning. That is not what the Gita says. But we only know that if we include Krishna's loving words to Arjuna along with Krishna's teachings, his philosophical teachings. And then finally, I just want to leave you with, even though this portrait is fairly quick, and I could go on and on about it, but I'm more interested in really opening up for some dialogue and some thoughts from any of you. Because what you may not realize is that I came here to learn from all of you this morning. So that's why I'm going to leave plenty of time for that. But I'll just leave you with one, I'll just paraphrase it, one verse from the Chaitanya Charitamrita, which states that pure love, prema, the joy in prema for the bhakta is not in our own experience, but is in the experience in the other who is loved by us. It is often expressed in the phrase Krishna Sukha Hetu. It is our desire, our motive to please Krishna. And the principle is given by Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami that the great love is not in our own pleasure, but in giving pleasure and great satisfaction to the beloved and to others, to make others happy, to give happiness to others, to serve others. And we talk about seva, and we usually translate, what is the usual word that we translate seva with? Service. Well, what is service if it isn't about being sensitive to the other to whom you're giving the service? If you are not sensitive to the person who is the recipient of that service, then how is it serving that person at all? So service means sensitivity. The word seva can mean attend, to be aware of the other, to attend, to do things for the other person. That's why the golden rule doesn't really work for all of us. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. That's not bhakti. That's too egocentric. Now, I realize the world needs the golden rule because they're so far behind even that. And the golden rule would do well for so many. But the highest principle is bhakti, which is to do unto others as you can perceive what is best for them, what Krishna wants you to do in serving them. It has nothing to do with us. So we take the teachings, the theological teachings, we go a little further. We also agree that it is wonderful to serve others. It's wonderful to be ethically minded. But really, it's not in terms of our own self. It shouldn't be measured according to us. Jiva Goswami says in the Priti Sandarbha, he uses a grammatical term to demonstrate this. Because in Sanskrit, there is a verbal system where there's a middle voice. It's called Atmanepada, which is still an active, the subject transits to the object, serves the object, but with oneself in mind. It's called Atmanepada. You hear the word Atma, right? Self. But then there's another tense, which is Parasmaipada, which means to serve, the subject transits to the object. I serve the object with nothing of myself, but only the object. Parasmaipada. And that is bhakti. Parasmaipada. It's right there in the Sanskrit language. Isn't that amazing? And Jiva Goswami picks up on that and uses it to describe bhakti. Parasmaipada. So, as we advance in Krishna bhakti, I like the way Dayanandaji used the phrase today, when we get out of the way, when we can actually get out of the way, it's funny, we become self-realized, all to just forget about the self and just serve other selves. That's bhakti. That is love. That is Krishna prema. And so really, I'm here to celebrate that aspect that I've experienced in Prabhupada. The bold presentation of these beautiful gifts and jewels of the Vaishnava tradition, which I'm so privileged to be able to study every single day in my job. And this loving nature with which Prabhupada delivered them. I think that's the setting and the jewel. That's the portrait I have for Prabhupada. Who said that? Okay. So I'm just really, my organizers tell me, we got a good half hour, Sriyanandaji, right? And really, any thoughts that I would love to hear from any of you. And in fact, I see the Sriyanandaji with a microphone, so all can hear and it can be recorded. So I see hands all over. I don't know what you want to.
Okay, thank you, Garuda, for opening this up to discussion. And we'll do male, female. So
okay.
First, just start right in line here with Bhargava. I encourage everyone, please keep your questions as questions rather than as lectures, please.
It can be a comment, but not a dissertation.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
So I want to hear from everyone.
Harbo Garudaji. I was lucky to see Garuda in action at a conference in San Diego about a year ago. And I know Prabhupada would be very pleased with him because he was with a bunch of other scholars on different bhakti traditions, and they all had such affection for him, and he had such affection for them. And it was beautiful to watch. And I was in Europe with Prabhupada, and a scholar came to visit Prabhupada, and he had a Mayavadi commentary on Krishna's pastimes in his book. And he told Prabhupada that he'd spent 7 years writing the book, and Prabhupada said, and still there's some mistakes. And the guy turned icy cold. Later on, he wrote a nice commentary about, a nice review of Prabhupada's books. But then Prabhupada said afterwards, he said, we speak the truth, so we make enemies. So I'm going to put you on the spot, Prabhu, and after you, I'll bend over and you can give me a hard kick for doing it, because I have such great respect.
I appreciate the option there.
Oh, well. Lucky it's well padded. No, I have to ask you about, the changes in Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita. The original Bhagavad Gita, which I worked on and a lot of devotees here worked on. And I have to ask you your opinion in the spirit of more than scholars, we're sadhus, and when sadhus got to speak the truth, and I'm really putting you on the spot.
Yes.
But what can I do?
Yeah. You have no choice. I understand. Okay, next question would be fine. I see Srila is hiding the microphone way behind the asana. Yeah.
Could I ask you if you would just not answer that question?
Oh, okay. So then I've got, he wants an answer, you don't want an answer. Let me respond. Let me respond, but not answer. And say that, Arjuna had an ethical dilemma that was irresolvable. To fight or not to fight. I mean, this is Arjuna all over again. To change the books or edit the books, to not edit the books, to not change the books, And, if you look at Arjuna, he had very rational thinking on a certain level for reasons not to fight and reasons to fight. And I think that what's important here, if it somehow could happen, that the two sides of this argument be something that would be transcending argumentation to a level of sharing and concern. There are really sincere concerns on both sides, in my estimation. And so it actually is impossible for me to take a position, just like it was impossible for Arjuna to take a position at the time. But what did Krishna do to help Arjuna? He had him go deeper into himself. And he offered the formula of Matchitta Magata Prana. Matchitta. First, go deep in focusing on me. Give your life to me. Then, Bodhyanta Parasparam. Then we can enlighten one another. Not argue with one another, but enlighten one another. And show the genuine concerns involved on both sides. And I think this could be really valuable. Dayanandaji, you...
Excuse me. This is a moderated discussion.
Yeah.
So please don't jump in without raising your hand and being recognized.
Yeah.
I beg you.
You don't have to listen to him. I'm sorry. That was very...
And Garudaji has invited this kind of discussion because, as I'm reading his title, Challenges in Understanding Srila Prabhupada's Words, it's a very fair question. And, it's something that I think we have to always be open and sensitive to all varieties around any particular profound question. We can't be afraid to ask it. We can't feel like it's inappropriate if it's done in a respectful way.
Yeah.
That's the nature of good and honest and useful Vaishnava discussions. So
Yes.
I don't have any problem with it. Next question, please.
Garudaji, thank you so much. This reminds me of many old conversations. I think Brahmananda summoned very well what you talked about today. He said, Srila Prabhupada managed to love us even though we're not very lovable. So you explained today what we need to do to love and, to hear each other. it would be nice maybe that we begin a conversation, not necessarily today, but maybe a little bit, about how to do it. Because oftentimes we teach what to do, but not how to do it. Because my experience as the devotees, they don't know how to do that. We don't have the skills, the tools, the understanding. We need to have seminars and groups and open our minds so we can do that. So talk please a little bit about how we can do that. That will make it that much more complete.
Yes, okay.
Or at least, a general framework.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you for your comment and question. I think the answer really is in that chapter 10, verse 9, that machitta magata. First, it's a matter of going deep inside, but with the intent of sharing. Bhakti means sharing. The word bhakta means one who is loved, and that's clearly, Krishna, who's loving us, and then one who loves. So we love Krishna because we are loved. And if we're not experiencing that from Krishna or from other devotees, then what kind of community do we have? It's very important, thank you for that, by the way. It's very important, I think, to start with a certain motive. Now remember, the Bhagavatam says, savai pungsam parodharmo what is it? Ato bhaktir nirhokchaje ahaitukya pratiyata. Okay, so ahituki, it means it's unmotivated. Do you know the way to practice unmotivated dealings with one another? The paradox is declare your actual motive. You can't transcend that which you're unaware of or that which remains undeclared. Say what your motive is. So you're in a discussion with someone who wants to change Prabhupada's books and you don't feel Prabhupada's books should be changed. You can say, my motive is to snuff you out of existence. Okay, now that's a little extreme, okay? But you know what? You could, but to be honest in the communications. I'm upset with your project. I'm upset with what you want to do. But at the same time, I know you're a devotee. I know you love Prabhupada. I know you love the movement and the devotees. Why would you want to do this? I'm going to try to really understand. That should be the motive. The motive is, it should be connected to certain healthy preconceptions that Krishna is in their heart. Prabhupada is teaching me through their hearts. And now it's up to me to be honest with them, forthcoming, and explain my motive, and ask them now, what is your motive for doing this or doing that? So, unmotivated, ahituki, apratiyata. By the way, apratiyata means not stopping. So, it means to be honest. The translation of ahituki apratiyata means continuous, honest, vulnerable declaration of one's motives and appreciating what one offers in the same way back to you. So I think that's the beginning of a discussion. Prabhupada didn't create the International Society for Krishna Consciousness so we could be like other societies. Oh good, we can have all kinds of politics like other societies. Oh good. Well, then why would we have our society? What's different about our society is that it's a bhakti society. It's based on sharing, even difficult things. So, if we are to be practicing unmotivated and uninterrupted devotional service, that means to be sensitive and aware of the other person. So I think that is the initial groundwork that needs to be done, and to appreciate why this person would be so, interested in this angle or that angle. But anyway, there's much more I could say about this. It's a complex topic, but I think the first thing to do is to declare one's motives. Even in letters, you're writing a controversial letter to the GBC about something. Start off, my motive in writing this to you today is I care about this, and I'm concerned about this, And this is why I pour my heart out to you. And then get into what it is that you propose. But keeping your motive undeclared keeps everything in a compromised place. Humility is to do this. Humility is not being servile or passive and to do anything anyone asks you. That's not humility. That's a self-esteem problem. Yeah, that's a self-esteem problem. Humility means to be boldly putting forward yourself in an honest, forthcoming way and to receive responses. So that's, I think that's the first thing we really have to do with one another to be a different kind of society. Does that make sense? Yeah? No? Okay, I'll argue with you later. We'll have it out, Dayanandaji. I love arguing with Dayananda. It always ends with a huge hug and so sweet. So,
Hare Krishna, Garuda.
yes,
Thank you very much. It was a very inspiring discussion.
thank you.
My name's Rajendra Nandana Das.
Yes.
And I think we all understand the realized platform of Krishna consciousness is the platform of love for Krishna and all that is dear to Krishna, all who are dear to Krishna. And I just thought I would share with you a one-liner that I heard from an exalted Vaishnava I hold very dear a couple of years back. He said, "You really will not understand Srila Prabhupada's teachings until you understand how he applied those teachings with others," which you deliberated very nicely upon in this discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah. Yes. The application is it's the setting of the gem. It's the setting of the gem. Thank you for that.
Next question from Mataji. Any Matajis?
You know, while
A nice idea. Please do say your name before you speak.
Yeah.
Introduce yourself.
Thank you for class. I'm Saraswati Devidasi. So you mentioned the different secrets Krishna told Arjuna, and one of the first ones you said was to do your duty in the world with great heart. Is that karma yoga, or can that also be devotional service? Because sometimes we feel like, okay, we go to work, then we come to the temple to do devotional service, but if devotional service should be uninterrupted, can it be our whole life? Can it be our job? Can it be our home? Can it be everything?
Wonderful. Just in the simplest of terms, Prabhupada presented bhakti as containing anything we need in the way of karma, action in the world, and anything we need to have in the way of jnana. And in fact, even in the Bhagavad Gita, when Krishna is speaking about jnana, he's speaking about a special kind of knowing that's not just intellectual, but of the heart. A special knowing from the heart. And we also know this from the Brahma Samhita. Premanjana Chodita Bhakta Valochanena Santa Sadaiva Hridayeshu Valokayanti. We see within the heart, right? Achintya Guna Swarupam. That which wouldn't even be able to be intellectualized. Achintya Guna Swarupam. So we know there's regular intellectual knowledge, and that goes on in universities, and that's fine. But then there's a special knowing of the heart, which is a much deeper knowing. And this is spoken of particularly in chapter 7, as I recall, as well as a few other places as well. But yes, of course, it's wonderful to come to the temple. I mean, why would you want to come to the temple it's overwhelming. It's, there are not a lot of temples like this one, and especially with my master. Yes. So, but again, it's about how much can we expand our frame of reference, devotional service. How much can we take it? How much can we be ambassadors? I mean, Bhargavaji was talking about my interactions with scholars. You think Krishna is not sending you the people you need to be with in your work? Is Krishna that limited? I don't think so, right? I don't think so. There are special gifts to be had in every situation that we find ourselves in. Just like Arjuna had in front of him the whole time Sri Krishna Bhagavan. I mean, right there. But, you know, Arjuna had to go through some of that shock treatment in the 11th chapter. I mean, he's so daunted by the Virata Rupa. Then he could appreciate more, you know. In fact, remember, he apologized. He said, Krishna, I'm so sorry. I called you, hey, Yadava, you know, hey, Madhava, hey, Krishna. I'm so sorry. I've been hanging out with you so informally. But then they went back into it. You know, once I was teaching at Duke University before teaching at other later universities. My son came to me in the morning and said, I'm bored. I said, why aren't you in school? He said, there's a teacher meeting day. I said, oh, okay. Well, I'm going to school. I have to teach. He said, can I come with you? I said, you want to come with me? He said, yeah. I said, okay. So he went, parked the car, walked across campus. I had 50 kids in this class. He's sitting way in the back. You know, they're all handing in papers. They're asking me questions. And then everyone's gone. He's sitting in the back. I said, okay, let's go. He kept looking at me on the way to the car. He kept looking at me weird. And I said, is there a problem? He said, I can't believe what happened back there. I'm thinking the kids are smoking dope behind their seat. I don't know what she's talking about. You know, he was sitting in the back. And he said, I said, what do you mean? And he said, they think you are all so smart. They think you are so smart when I know that you're really quite dumb. I said, yeah, of course, you know. And that's the nature of intimacy. He just couldn't comprehend anything that took place in that whole hour. It just went over his head. He just couldn't, it just wasn't with it. So, you know, what is in front of us? There's more intimate connection with Krishna than we can know. We just have to find it and look for it. And again, share with the other devotees how to see the treasures in our lives that are just, our lives are perfectly imperfect. They are perfectly imperfect. They're, in the ways that they are imperfect and all the problems, they're perfectly designed for our perfection. So it's about realizing it. It's great stuff, isn't it? Yeah. What's your name, Rameshwarji?
Hare Krishna, your servant, Hare Krishna. I wanted to tell you the thing I took most from your talk. And when you said that Krishna is willing to wait for as long
eternity
as it takes for us, and that I had known, at least intellectually, I had been taught that and believe it with all my heart. But what you said after that was so emotional. And you said because of Prabhupada's position, Guru Tattva's representing Krishna, you said, and Prabhupada is waiting for us for as long as it takes. He will never give up on us. And when you said that to me, I took that more than anything else from what you spoke today as a divine revelation, and I want to thank you for that. Just so emotional to think of Prabhupada in that way. And I was thinking that you referred to Prabhupada's letters and his interactions with his disciples. Well, in 100 years, the readers of his books aren't going to maybe have access to that dimension of Prabhupada. And yet, if they read that Krishna will wait for us forever, they will also learn from reading Prabhupada's books that he will wait for them forever as their Siksha Guru. And I believe that's in his books. Whether they see how he interacted with us or not, they will feel such a personal connection and love coming from Prabhupada by reading his books. I believe that.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Rameshwarji. In particular, I find that that loving setting that is in Prabhupada's books, I find in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. That's where I find it. And what's that? Well, okay, yeah, then we can keep going. But and Upadeshamritam, okay, but in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, because of Mahaprabhu's, own loving interactions, Prabhupada, I think he comes out and talks about how even addresses his godbrothers there in certain places, that these boys and girls are every bit as good as, he parades us, he champions us to them. Meanwhile, he's trying to pick us up off the floor. So just like a proud parent, just you see on the back of the bumper sticker, my kid is an honor student. Prabhupada's got on his Vimana or something. My devotees, they're pure devotees. And then he cleans us up. And deals with us. But thank you for that comment. I'm especially, I have to share with you that I'm especially moved. I think I mentioned to you earlier that you were telling me how Stilson Judah, the first scholar really that Prabhupada, I think, really took a liking to. Am I correct on this, Dayananda? Rameshwar, is that? He really appreciated his work on the movement. I think it was the first book on the movement. Am I correct on this? It was a great book. Prabhupada liked that book by Stilson Judah. And of all the universities that Prabhupada had lectured at, including Harvard, where I was for 13 years, he when he went to GTU, Graduate Theological Union, where Stilson Judah taught, it's the only place where he said, we should be here. And there have been attempts over the years for us to be there. And I come here just days before actually being inducted as the Distinguished Teaching and Research Fellow of the Graduate Theological Union.
Jai, Hari Hari Bol.
So I just feel Prabhupada moving me. I'm a full professor. I've made it to the top. I don't need to do anything more. But look how Prabhupada is just, and then this unlikely invitation to come to a Prabhupada festival, which, by the way, I've never been to one. And so here, I'm coming here to see where it all happened, and then I go up to GTU and give a course to a bunch of doctoral students. On what? Bhagavad Gita. You've heard of that book, I think, everyone. Okay. So it's amazing. But thank you, Rameshwarji. This is the thing. Krishna is embracing. I have this whole, once we understand this setting feature of the Gita, things get lit up differently. Like the whole Brahman and Paramatman feature of Krishna. They're already embracing us from without and within. And yet, Krishna desires more of us. This word ishtosime, ishta. It's a word, there are many words for love in English. In Sanskrit, not in English. But in Sanskrit, dozens of words for love. This one word has the sense of desire. Krishna says, I desire you. He's actually saying, I desire you. I've already been embracing you for an eternity, and now I desire you more. I feel Prabhupada has done the same. He has embraced us, and he desires us more. It's I think, a beautiful, simple trope. Thank you.
Okay, Hare Krishna. Thank you very much for your talk. I have a question actually for people that are watching on the internet and all over. If you could address it, and I hope it not to be too controversial of a question, but
Well, after Bhargava's question, I mean, he can't do anything as bad as what he did. So.
well, maybe even a little worse.
Yeah.
In a lot of Prabhupada's books, Prabhupada speaks directly about women and the size of women's brains and a lot of, so you know where I'm going with this question.
Yes, good.
Derogatory comments directed towards women, and as being a devotee, for many, many years, women have taken quite of a back seat to men. So could you address that, please?
Okay. Ideally, I would like to address that in a separate forum because I have a lot to say about that. A lot. But there's kind of a paradox going on there. And in my... Oh, okay. You keep pointing upstairs, but that's Garuda. Oh, I see. You're not trying to intimidate me here, or just... I mean, it's just, they didn't tell me that. They were going to do that. And, here's the thing. Prabhupada may make generalizations, and we should not imitate Prabhupada when he makes his generalizations. He's speaking from a whole different angle than we are. But here's the thing. If you assert the statement that women are less intelligent, generally speaking, are less intelligent than men, this is the way I understand it. It's very simple. That is true. Women tend to be less intelligent than men in the ways that men tend to be intelligent, but you can't make that statement without the converse. Women are more intelligent than men in the ways that women tend to be more intelligent. So, for example, in the Gita, one of the qualities of the feminine is intelligence. Medha. So, Prabhupada would not want to contradict that. Prabhupada may be underscoring the intelligence of men. And certainly we can see that in the world. We can see that, men tend to be car mechanics. Now, I don't know how to fix a car. I barely know how to turn on a car. But men tend to be car mechanics. Okay? Women tend to be in education in the primary stage, primary education. Okay? There are all kinds of reasons perhaps for this. But we each possess a special kind of intelligence. So a man might possess buddhi, but a woman possesses medha. And medha, I was having a discussion with Yadavar's wife, Vishaka, on this. And medha is a different kind of intelligence. And this is maybe not so much expounded upon in the books, but that's something that can be expounded upon. And I find it fascinating. And of course, don't forget that the greatest bhaktas that we revere among anyone, anywhere, are the Vrajagopikas. They are the model. They are the model. I have to admit that one day, a sannyasi friend of mine, very close friend, said to me, Garuda, you're into all that love stuff. I said, excuse me? I don't know. He said, you wrote about the Ras Leela, you published it with Princeton University Press, you're and I said, I'm more into the Mahabharata. I said, okay, but we're kind of a love stuff tradition. It's kind of what we're about. So I offered to relocate him in the Ramakrishna mission if he would feel more comfortable. Or for example, I know other people in other traditions, and I offered this to him. He politely declined, and so I, of course, haven't done anything about it. But we are about the love stuff. We're a tradition of the heart. We are about really refining the heart and learning how to love. And this is why I painted this portrait of Prabhupada today, to offer lovingly to all of you, as much as I can lovingly make such an offering. But, I feel that the way we can most lovingly reciprocate with Prabhupada's books, with the sweet setting and the bold teachings, is to come out with commentaries on Prabhupada's purports and to bring them out more into the world discourse and current discourse, and not to assume that the law books for the next 10,000 years are going to always speak to people. Now, it's interesting, Prabhupada used the word law books, I believe, right? He did use that. Is that right, Rabasharji?
Definitely use that term.
Okay. Law books. Now, I'm going to take that term seriously. What do you do with law books? All law books have what's called amendments. Now, amendments don't necessarily mean corrections or changes. It means additions also. You look it up in the dictionary. Amendments means additions. Things that can further illuminate. And so I predict that the next frontier, and if I think Swavas is not here, that's good. No, I just want to bring this on to him gradually. I don't want to, the next frontier, I believe, are beautiful commentaries illuminating what Prabhupada said. Not changing what he said, but illuminating what he said and bringing it into current discourse. So there should, as formally as we have Bhagavatams, we should have commentaries that comment on Prabhupada's comments. And this, I feel, even today, I find the younger generation, very honestly, the younger generation has come up to me and said, I've learned more and found more approachable things that you disciples have been writing than Prabhupada's writings. Okay, what are you going to do with that? I think what we're going to do with that is take the jewel of that Prabhupada has given us and, again, make the setting even bigger. If we keep the setting, look, if somehow I have a Rembrandt painting in my house and I take it to Walmart for a "you frame it," that's just not appropriate for a Rembrandt. Okay. Now, I feel we've given, what you've done all those years, you gave Prabhupada's books an incredible frame, beautiful frame. The movement will always be indebted to you, Rameshwarji. It's amazing what has taken place in this very temple. And no one will disagree with me, I'm sure of it. I'm not talking about you. But you know what? It doesn't mean that we can't frame it more elaborately, and because the jewel is becoming even all the more precious to that many more people and future generations that are happening now.
If Prabhupada did not intend that, he would not have said, I want my disciples to write.
Right.
He never said that instruction.
Exactly.
If he did not intend it.
Exactly. In fact, when I was giving a Sunday feast lecture in Washington Potomac Temple, a brahmachari I've never met before, he got up and he said, how could you, a disciple of Prabhupada, pretty, intense, how could you write publish with a world publisher, HarperCollins, a Bhagavad Gita translation and commentary, how could you do that to Prabhupada? I said, I didn't know I was doing anything. You seem rather upset, and I'm concerned. I'd like to know more about how you think that this is somehow hurting Prabhupada and Prabhupada's movement. But let me explain to you. And then I talked a little bit about how I've been using Prabhupada's Gita for over 2 decades in the classroom, sold thousands of Gitas to students, but not just selling them, I forced them to read it. They were, their exams. Now, those of you who got on book distribution, do you give exams to the people that? No, I don't think so. No. I was applauded on high. Yeah, very good. Okay, good. So, I definitely have not distributed as many books as people who have done here. There's no question about it. But when I do distribute one, they gotta really work. Okay? I work them. But the thing is this, I also explained that little anecdote that Pradyumna, by the way, the comments that were made by Prabhupada about Panditji were so, I mean, that just melted me. That was so sweet. And you can see that loving dependency that Prabhupada had on his disciples, such as yourself, and Dayananda, and so many that are here, Bhargava and others, Yadavar, and so many. But that I explained in an anecdote. Pradyumna relates one day they were sitting with Prabhupada, and Radhavallabha said, "So what will you translate next, Prabhupada?" Prabhupada said, "Oh, there's so many: Mahabharata, Ramayana, Vedanta Sutra, and the Bhagavad Gita." Everyone kind of looked around like, did we hear this? So Radhavallabha had enough gumption to say, "Prabhupada, haven't you already translated the Bhagavad Gita?" And Prabhupada said, "Oh yes, but there are so many commentaries, we can do more." But I didn't bring that in first, I didn't want to keep, this habit of using Prabhupada to justify my existence. I'm just hoping there's some loving devotees out there that say, "Hey, there's Garuda, he might have something to say." But I didn't bring that in first. I gave him my experience. And then I said, "By the way, there is that anecdote." See.
Let me see a show of hands, please, of those Prabhupada disciples who want to share their memories so I can get a sense of what to do with the time that we have remaining. Can you just raise your hand if you want to share your memories until 1? We have until 1 o'clock, about 10 to 1 to do that. We're going to have a presentation at 12:40. Bhargava, yours is how long? Right, so at 12:40 we're going to have a presentation by Bhargava, a video. What's the subject?
A lot of devotees never got to travel with Prabhupada. I did, so they've heard about it. Now they can get some visuals of Prabhupada.
So he's going to show
Wonderful.
a montage of pictures of Prabhupada traveling in various places throughout the world. And then after that, His Holiness Giriraj Swami is going to speak. So if I can just have a tally of the people who'd like to share between now and 12:40. Their Prabhupada pastimes. Raise your hand. 1, 2, 3. Oh, bear with me. I'll get to you. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so we have plenty of time.
Well, you're telling me I have to sit up here longer?
We have plenty of time to request humbly if Garuda would extend his visit with us and sharing. How many people would like that to carry on? What can I do? I mean, the will of the people.
That is a leading question. They're all going to sit here. No, we don't want to hear Garuda anymore. I mean,
so I think if I can speak on behalf of the assembled Vaishnavas, could we request you to sit there for as long as we want?
Okay.
Thank you. Dayananda Prabhu would like to shed some commentary on Rameshwar Prabhu's insights.
No, I just wanted to respond with an anecdote from Prabhupada. It starts in 1976. I was in Iran with my wife Nandarani, and I had a tremendous relationship with the Trey Rishi. Trey Rishi was there in Iran,
right,
as the GBC, and we really bonded. Nandarani, not so much with a Trey Rishi. So a Trey Rishi came to New York to see Prabhupada, and he said, how's Dayananda and Nandarani? Prabhupada asked the Trey Rishi, how's Dayananda and Nandarani? And the Trey said, oh, they're doing fine, and he explained, and then and Atreya said to Prabhupada, Dayananda is very intelligent. And then Prabhupada said, but Nandarani is more intelligent.
Yeah, I can see that. I just know her, so I just.
And then Atreya Rishi said, well, I think Dayananda is really quite intelligent. And Prabhupada said, yes, but Nandarani is more intelligent.
That's
And this is, you can find this online, unfortunately.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah, you're a brave soul, Dayanandaji, definitely.
He finally learned that even when she's wrong, she's right.
Prabhupada never said that.
Thank you so much for such an insightful talk. It was very, very exciting for me. I have a very simple question. When you present the Bhagavad Gita as it is to the academic faculty, the general tendency is to think they respond back by saying it's a Hindu religious text. What do you think is the best way? What kind of words do you use, particularly in the academic field, to not use the word religious because that deters the scientists away? What would be the best way to describe the book?
Well, I am a religion scholar, so that's going to be a little hard to get away from. Once I was teaching, in one of my courses I was teaching at Duke University, there were about 50 kids in the class, and there was one student who would come in, walk straight to the back of the classroom, to the corner of the classroom, it was kind of a tight room. There weren't a lot of seats, but he would reserve 2 desks, one to sit in the corner, in such a way he could lean against the corner to kind of, hold his body from falling over, and the other desk he put his feet up on. Every class. Now, I was a new professor, just got my doctorate from Harvard, and I was, a little green at teaching. I was teaching at Harvard for a couple of years, but still pretty green at it, okay? So this guy comes in, every single class he comes in, puts his feet up, he says nothing, does nothing, he walks out, it makes like he just came in for a nap. I looked actually to see if he was actually registered for the class, and he was. So then we start on the Bhagavad Gita, and Bhagavad Gita as it is, and suddenly I see him wake up from his nap, his arm goes up vigorously, like you better answer me, and he says, Dr. Schweig, why are we using the Bhagavad Gita produced by the Hare Krishna movement? Trying to embarrass me. I said, I am so glad you asked that question, and I'm so glad you finally woke up in my class. And in fact, Bhagavad Gita, this particular edition of the Bhagavad Gita has awakened quite a few people, not just you. So obviously it's had a good effect on you, and I intend that perhaps it could have a good effect on the rest of you here. And I said, look, I'm just a mundane scholar with mundane degrees. This is a person who lives and breathes the Gita. And I think it would do us well to understand what someone within the tradition experiences. That's why we're using the Bhagavad Gita from the Hare Krishna movement. Go back to sleep. So, this doesn't really respond to your question at all. But this is to say that, for me, I don't teach in the natural sciences. I'm a scholar of religion. My diploma says comparationem, religionem comparationem. They don't know how to write in English up there yet. In Latin, comparative religion. And actually, I followed the instructions that originally Prabhupada gave to Giriraj Swami. He's not here yet, right? Okay, so I can speak about him. Okay, good. Let me tell you about Giriraj Swami. In 1969, his parents wrote to Prabhupada saying, our son is at Brandeis University. He's a very intelligent, young man. And, we would like him to stay in college. And Prabhupada then responded to them, I believe, and then wrote to Giriraj and said, Dear Giriraj, I understand that, you're an intelligent boy. Your parents have written to me and say that you're pursuing studies on divinity and psychology. He said, we are on the topic of divinity. And if you can prove through comparative study that Krishna consciousness is the highest theological conclusion, this will be a great contribution. Well, I basically modeled so one day, a long time ago, while I was just beginning my studies at Harvard, I went to Garuda Swami and said, you did not follow Prabhupada's instructions. I am following them for you. He didn't like that too much. No, he actually did appreciate that. He said, that's true. He said, I dropped out of school to become a devotee, like so many did. I'm sort of like a backwards devotee. I dropped in. It was a little strange, but in terms of proving, we have to be careful not to prove things with the Bhagavad Gita. How much better is it? I mean, look at the difference. Someone comes to the temple, never been in the temple, and you sit down with them and you say, look, you should take up devotional service. Why? Because Prabhupada is a pure devotee, and he tells us to do so, and he tells us how. Okay? Are you ready? Or, what about this? Welcome. Prabhupada is the one teacher I've had in my life that has moved mountains for me. Changed my life, transformed my life. And this is how it happened. And now I live the life of a Krishna Bhakta. I'd love for you to experience more. That says so much more about Prabhupada than saying what Prabhupada is. I suggest that you don't use the verb to be when talking about Prabhupada. Even sometimes we mean it well. A lot of times devotees will come up to me very appreciatively and say, surely Prabhupada is very pleased with you, Garuda. I'm thinking, how the heck do they know? But what they're actually saying, more accurately, is, I would love to tell Prabhupada about you. That's really what they're saying. We don't know whether Prabhupada would be pleased. This is an assumption we cannot make. I can't even tell, as well as I've known Dayanandaji all these years, I don't know what's going to make him happy. Or Radhanath Swami, I've known Radhanath Swami for years, and we hung out with the cows for 3 hours. I should know from that experience. When we hung out with the cows at his eco-village farm, which is so beautiful. But I don't know. No one can say, Radhanath Swami, you would be very pleased with Garuda. You'd have to ask him. But I can say, Radhanath Swami, I'm so proud to know what this godbrother or godsister has done. What do you think? I'm proud to present it. So that's really more honest language. We don't know what Prabhupada would be pleased with. I mean, in general, we might know, but we don't know how much or how little and so on. But but stay away from Prabhupada is, with others and ourselves. Prabhupada is a pure devotee. Just somehow it sounds too limiting to me. But then if you say Prabhupada is God, again, I think we've got to stay away from that, as Prabhupada himself said so. And clearly, Prabhupada presented God. He is not God. Say what Prabhupada is to you. That is so much more valuable. The way you feel, what you've experienced is absolute, because not even a God can tell you how you feel. That is not up to anyone else. So that's absolute. If you want to argue philosophy, we can argue philosophy. These things can be argued. Rational discussions, you can go back and forth. Logic, rhetoric. Krishnadas Kaviraj himself in the Chaitanya Charitamrita challenges, bring your logic to me. Let's argue here, right? So you can argue about logic. Feelings belong to each of us. No one can tell you how you feel. So that is precious. That is precious currency that you have to offer. But all of us should stay away from the verb to be. Prabhupada is. Now, we can speak philosophically, like, Prabhupada himself did this morning. The guru is on the external, and then Chaitya Guru, and so on, right? But, so as far as proving things to other persons in other fields, it's a little tricky. Do you have degrees, or are you a specialist in a particular area? I'm sorry? Oh, you are? What field? Biotechnology. I have absolutely no idea what that field's about. And but I respect you for that, being that field, and you have a PhD in it, probably, yes? Okay, and do you research or teach? You do both. So the question is, how do you relate your field of expertise? I mean, it's a lot of work to get a doctorate. You and I know this. So a lot of tapas, right? So is it that you're feeling like you want to present Bhagavad Gita and make it relevant to biotech, to scientists? Okay. Well, Prabhupada had a lot to say about scientists, right? Life comes from life. Life does not come from matter, that kind of thing. And these days, there is movement into consciousness studies and contemplative studies, and they're measuring the something or others of the brain, and they're discovering that when a human being meditates, there's a part of the brain that's actually activated that is not activated by any other activity, right? So, they're doing slowly but surely, But scientific measurement is limited to the senses. We use microscopes to see the smallest, we use telescopes to see the biggest, but those lenses will never be the lens of the heart. So you've got a problem there. You got a challenge. I've got it easy. You've got it more difficult. But, by your own example, as a loving bhakta, you will, like Einstein did, show that there's more than science. And that science is really epiphenomenal to spirit. So I challenge you. Let me know if you make inroads. But there are good things to do. My wife and I were flown down to the Bahamas to this, Radhanath Swami goes there quite a bit, to the Shivananda Yoga Ashram. And I was part of a special symposium on altered states of consciousness. Originally, I thought they were inviting me as a specimen of such a thing. And then later to find out that I was supposed to talk about that sort of thing. And I talked about it from the standpoint of yoga and the Yoga Sutra, which I'm currently working on. And then they had a neuroscientist there who studies Buddhism. And he was talking about so many of the states of the Buddhist Vipassana and so on. And I finally told him, I said, you may want to study Vedanta, because that's where the Buddhists got it from. I mean, why, go back to the roots. So I'm trying to convince him to look at that more. And look at the Bhagavad Gita more and other texts that really reveal this kind of thing. But anyway, so it's a wonderful challenge. It's a worthy struggle. That's what I'd like to leave you with. It's a worthy struggle. And that's why the word challenge is the first word in the title of my talk today. Challenges are good for us. Not to be, content. Be challenged. Go deeper. Just like Mahaprabhu said to Ramananda Roy, go deeper. He did this for 100 pages. Go deeper. He said, well, what is the highest activity for the human being? He first started off, I believe, with Varnashrama. And then Mahaprabhu said, that's Bahya. That's external. Go deeper. And he kept saying, go deeper and go deeper. I think that's what I'd like all of us to do. Let's go deeper with one another. Let's get into, here's my email. Here, I'll give you mine. Oh, that's for later, yeah. But it's good, worthy struggle, worthy challenge.
Jai, so you mentioned that you're topic is Challenges in Understanding Srila Prabhupada's Words. And you began your sharing with us by talking about the word for the translation for yoga.
Right.
Remember? So my question, if you'll allow me to enter the fray.
I think I'm ready for you now, Ms. Ringgold.
Is when a person receives Srila Prabhupada's books today,
Yeah. Okay.
they're reading these words that are ostensibly written by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. But thousands of those words now are not written by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. So your topic is understanding Prabhupada's words. So how do you understand the words that Prabhupada didn't write?
Now, which words are these?
These are the words that have been changed.
Oh, you're back
in the
on
book.
that bark of a thing.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
back.
Okay. Good. Okay.
And I think it's a fair question
Okay.
for your topic, because a reader of those words is now reading translations of Sanskrit that are not Prabhupada's translations of Sanskrit.
Okay.
And they're not even credited to the person who retranslated them or felt there was a better way to describe them. So now we're back to the challenge of understanding Srila Prabhupada's real words.
Do you all want me to really entertain this question or not? So you don't like me very much, obviously. Okay. Now, okay.
I just want to, can I get a little applause for that? Thank you.
How audacious of you to request applause.
It was your topic.
Yeah, my topic. But I sort of turned it on its head.
Yes.
Right? But now you're turning it upside down.
You left out the elephant in the room.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to offer some very straightforward experiences of mine. When I first entered graduate school, there were other graduate students there that had read Prabhupada's Gita. And back then, the Gita was Prabhupada's Gita. I mean, there weren't changed words or anything. And people asked me, they said, why are there so many mistakes and peculiar usage in that book? And I kind of didn't expect that question. And I was taken aback a little bit. And, here's the thing. We devotees have a certain jargon that we've evolved over the years. And, my wife and I made a list of ISKCONisms that really only you and I understand, but you say something like that to the outer world, they look at you with a perplexed expression. So when Prabhupada says, for example, that Krishna expanded himself to the gopis, we know what is meant. But I had to write, Krishna duplicated himself multiple times to each and every gopi. Because if you say Krishna expanded himself, it seems like... And that's a problem. Krishna did not blow up like a balloon. The phrase mental speculation, we heard this right here, okay? This is a peculiar phrase. People don't mental, it sounds tautologous or redundant, right? Well, speculation, obviously, yeah. So, mental speculation, yes. Mental speculation, that's a little peculiar. Anyway, we have a list 3 pages long of our ISKCON jargon that only we understand. We need to make sure, now, in Tamal's book that I worked hard on, when he left 5 chapters for a dissertation for University of Cambridge, and they were still in rough shape, and I had to edit them to put them into shape, and then I wrote the introduction and the conclusion to the book, and got it. I even gave the title to the book, because as we all know, Tamal Krishna Goswami, he left abruptly. We didn't know he was going to leave. And the trustees of his estate asked me to finish this book, complete this book. And if any of you have not seen it, I've got a copy, you can take a look at it here. But here is Tamal, he's trying to appreciate, what made Prabhupada so powerful in distributing this knowledge of the Vaishnava tradition. Really, as a scholar, and he's a devotee, but he's a scholar. And this is a difficult sort of role to play, a kind of dual role. So when Prabhupada is indebted to his early disciples who put out the books, who edited the books. And, when you think about it, how old were we when we edited the books? I mean, Jayadvaita, as brilliant as he is now, he was a high school dropout. For that matter, I'm a high school dropout. I'm embarrassed to tell you all. But anyway, but the idea is that we were so young and inexperienced. What's happening here? Was that a sign? Oh, do we have to do anything here? You keep going.
We continue.
Okay. We have a very experienced devotee who says we keep going here, so we're going to do that. Okay. So, the idea is that Prabhupada and some devotees are they don't like this. They don't like historicizing Prabhupada because they feel that's treating the spiritual master like an ordinary person. But what is the spiritual master? I heard it here this morning. I read about it all the time. There's one function of a spiritual master and one function only. It's to transmit the grace of divinity to the devotee. This is there in all of the Shastras. It's the one thing every spiritual teacher has in common, is to deliver that grace. Now, but Desha Kalapatra, right? Place, time, and circumstance will alter the way that is given. Prabhupada came from British India. He was educated at British Scottish Church College. He was educated at Scottish Church College, and that's not a bad thing. The very fact that Prabhupada, what were the British doing with Scottish Church College? Why were they even there in India in the first place? Well, they've been for a couple of centuries. They were missionizing all the Hindu heathens. And when they went to India, when all the early missionaries went to India, they thought, let us introduce, Jesus. Let's convert them. Well, they found out that Hindu traditions were really much more complex than they ever could have imagined. And the whole field of Indology came out of that. And the biggest, thickest Sanskrit dictionary came out of that whole thing. So this is, in some sense, they established a place like Scottish Church College, and then Prabhupada learned their language, came over to the West, and could speak to us. So when Prabhupada talked about, I think in one translation of the Gita, of a verse, I think he says, the kingdom of God. Well, that kind of speaks to a lot of us in the West, right? Kingdom of God, that sounds a little like familiar to Christians and Jews, kingdom of God. But frankly, there's no kingdom of God in the Sanskrit. So Prabhupada was speaking a language in a way, here and there, dipping into some familiar ideas, which I think was part of Prabhupada's genius. He knew how to speak to us. He knew how to speak to us and give us an alternative to the kingdom of God by presenting the kingdom of God. How about that? I just think that Prabhupada was just amazing in how he would be able to communicate. What 70-year-old man do you know now that can communicate to a 20-year-old? Look at Dayananda. He's... Yeah, exactly. He's even hard of hearing. He can't even hear. And Prabhupada said he started late. He started at 70. Now Dayananda's 70. So, look at him. And so So I asked him to be here so I could use him. He's fine with that, Srigananda. He's perfectly fine with that. Yeah, and I won't refer to others like Rameshwar and others. So I'm not going to. But the point is that look at the energy Prabhupada had harnessed at the age of 70. I mean, we all know this. I mean, it's just we can't comprehend it. A year ago, I was on a boat in the middle of Boston Harbor with 1,000 devotees, right, hosting that celebration of Prabhupada coming into Boston Harbor, penniless, friendless, nobody, nothing. I just couldn't imagine. It's just unbelievable to me. It's just unbelievable. First time I went to India was when I was 18, and I went with 5 other friends who were all older than me. They tried to take care of me, but I lost them. But anyway, in short, again, I have to go back, I have to default to my earlier statement. There are good reasons and not good reasons for editing, maybe some adjustments, but I have, in my experience, the movement has been always behind professionalism, doing things the professional way in terms of Western professionalism is standard. And there is a way to edit books and to show a second edition, a third, there's a way to describe these things and do them well. So we tend to fall behind and then catch up to the professional thing that's a little late. And then there's backpedaling, and then there's tension, and then there's disappointment, and then there's frustration, and then there's anger, and then there's infighting, and then there's Prabhupada said this, and the Prabhupada said that, and then there's, and then here we are, having a Prabhupada festival. So it all works out, one way or another. But really, it could have been done in a professional way. I'm not sure it was, and I think that's what you're really complaining about.
Yeah, I mean, if Jayadvaita Maharaj had put in his name on the book, we would have known it was his words that were interpreting Prabhupada's words, and it would have been very fair game. And Bhaktivedanta Book Trust could say that, we think this is better, and that's our decision. That
but Srilananda, I'm going to be totally vulnerable and honest. The last person in the BBT who took me seriously as someone being trained as a professional scholar in this field was Rameshwar. And ever since, no one has consulted me once with all of my training. I am published with the best publishers in the world. I know how these things work. No one has consulted me. I'm available. I have a phone. I'll give you the phone number right now. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not going to give you my phone. My point is that we're behind on a certain professional approach that I think could have prevented a lot of this. And we're sort of reaping the difficult and disappointing results. And I'm sorry about that. There is a professional way of going about it, though.
Thank you very much. I think that cleared things up a lot for a lot of the devotees here. Is that we got some comments? Guna, I do want to say that there are 3 cars parked on Watsika within the area that we need cars not parked. That's blocked off. So if those are your cars, if you wouldn't mind just moving those cars, please.
That wasn't my statement. I'm not a scholar, and I appreciate my name is Guna Mai. I'm not a scholar like you, and I really appreciate a lot of the things that you said, and I want to continue the discussion a little bit on the changing of Prabhupada's books. And I'm an artist, and I see it in one sense artistically. Still.
You know what it is? You go like this.
Oh, I'm going like this. Okay.
It's unidirectional. Yeah.
See? I see it also artistically and personally because all of Prabhupada's writings are very personal. They're his words.
Very personal.
They're his words, just like a Picasso, a Rembrandt, a Michelangelo. If somebody went to a Michelangelo painting and said, I don't like the way his foot is, I need to change it because it's not correct. Or they went to, for instance, Picasso and said, this line is not really proper, you know. Prabhupada thought very deeply about every word that he used. And he had, I think it's more than 5,000 disciples. None of us had any trouble becoming devotees with his choice of words. We got it. You know, so if we came and changed Picasso or changed Michelangelo, which is their personal artwork, or we changed a word in Bob Dylan's song and say, hey, this is not proper English, that's an insult to the artist. And that's the insult to Prabhupada's own personal writings. If we went into Srila Bhaktisiddhanta's translation in the Brahma Samhita, where it says in the introduction, it says, you know, we have not changed any of the words except for misspelling for fear of changing the subtle meaning. We have not changed anything. If we're going to change any words, there needs to be a footnote, an explanation. We have changed this. So I think as Prabhupada's personal offering, his personal blood, sweat, and tears into every word that he chose, we have no right to change it unless we put a footnote and the reason why we did it. And that's just my opinion.
Yeah.
I'm gonna kind of cut it short here on that subject, because I think it's everything that we needed to say has been said beautifully by both Garudaji and by Gunamayi Devi Dasi. I want to come back next year as the MC, so I got to cut this. I got to cut this discussion off.
You got to start performing a little better than what you've been doing. That's all I can tell you.
But at the same time, I have my own opinions about things. So I think if you have any other subjects to discuss, we're going to leave the subject of changing Prabhupada's books and move on to other areas. And it's a male's turn. And I see a male in the back. Yeah.
This is very gendered. This is a very gendered group we've got here. Yeah. Very balanced. It's good. I like that.
Thank you, Guru Das, for the great presentation. I was studying very intensely with Maharishi Mahesh Yogi for many years, the Yoga Sutras, so
yes.
I'm very interested to find out how they relate to Bhakti. I know I found in my own life, because I still practice them, and since I became a devotee, they've become devotionalized. They help me in my devotional service.
Yes, okay.
And being a devotee in this consciousness, then I can use them in a particular way to improve my perception, my clear perception of Krishna consciousness, my relationship with Krishna. So I'm very interested in what you're doing, because Maharishi himself, even though he was teaching us at the time that the highest level of consciousness was Brahman consciousness, at one point he said beyond Brahman consciousness is Krishna consciousness.
Yes.
So I really am looking forward to seeing your work on the Yoga Sutras.
Oh, thank you.
If you could make some comment on that, I'd appreciate it.
I mean, there are some real surprises in the Yoga Sutra. Now, back as long as 17 years ago, I became involved in the yoga communities, and I go in and they somehow awarded me their highest registration certification. What is it? ERYT 500. It sounds like the model of a car, but really it is a registration, experienced, what is it? Experienced registered yoga teacher 500. It's basically someone who's taught over 5,000 hours of yoga. Or the teaching. So I deal with not asana, but the philosophy, history of yoga, Bhagavad Gita, and the Yoga Sutra, and so on. And these poor teachers have to read not only the Bhagavad Gita, but the Yoga Sutra, for which there really is no decent, a sutra text can be very terse and encoded, and it's crude. It's not like the Bhagavad Gita, Dharma Kshetre, Kurukshetre, Samaveta, Yoyotsavaha. I mean, beautiful, flowing, philosophical verse. Yoga Sutra, Ata Yoganushasanam. yoga chitta vritti narodaha. Boom. I mean, there's nothing particularly flowing and beautiful, right, about it. But upon very careful examination of the texts in the Yoga Sutra, it's amazing what you find. There are such parallels and commonalities that are just uncanny. And beyond that, there is a raw concept and vision of divine grace in a text that no one has ever brought out. So through the lens of bhakti, bhakti lochana, we can illuminate, and my thesis will be to my publisher at Yale, that you can better understand the Yoga Sutra through the lens of bhakti than you can through this kind of mechanical, philosophical, background of yoga. So this is quite exciting to me. So I'm having fun with it, but I'm in the midst of it right now. I'm in the throes of it, and it's a great challenge. Always taking shelter of Prabhupada's gifts, bring that into the foreground. But I can't do what Prabhupada did. I can't say, yoga means devotional service. If I say that, I have to make a very careful line of argument to that. Prabhupada could assert that. I'm not Prabhupada. But in my own field, in my own role, I can show how yoga means union. Well, what union are we talking about here? I can show that yoga means rasa, but at the very highest level. But I have to take them there. So it's an arduous task. But thank you for your comment. Yeah. By the way, the Mahesh Yogi only translated and commented on the first 6 chapters. What happened to the other 12? That's all right. No one.
Maybe it was by Krishna's mercy. Somehow they were lost their soul. The person was on a course with the Sanskrit editor. Told him that.
Oh, I see. Okay, interesting. So he was intending to finish it, but just he did finish it, but just never got published. Yeah. Well, then they can read mine when it's. I'm sorry for the shameless self-promotion here of a book I haven't even published. It's terrible.
Vaikuntha Priya again. I just wanted to talk about the women's issue that Divya Drusti brought up, since it's going to be televised. My realization is that sometimes there's what the person says, like for example the comment on the brain, and what the person does. And sometimes in a particular context, Prabhupada would say certain things.
That's right.
Very kindly, very lovingly. Some people took it and made it like some kind of rigid assessment. And Prabhupada, the way he was to his female disciple, was just like the most respectful, the most protective, the most loving, the most empowering, the most everything. He gave us chances, opportunities that nobody else ever probably and will not in the future. So just to summarize this issue, I would just want to share a quick story that some of you may know, but in case you don't. Prabhupada was taking a walk in India, in Calcutta, Albert Road, with a bunch of disciples, and they're going around the neighborhoods, and they all started to complain, making some very negative comments about women. They're this, they're that, just complaining, and Prabhupada was saying, yeah, just nodding the head, yes, but not saying anything else. So finally, they make it back to the temple, and all the ladies, they stayed back, they cleaned the temple, they took care of the deities, they prepared breakfast, and they all rushed in when Prabhupada came in on top of the stairs, and as he got in, they were like, Jai Srila Prabhupada, and Prabhupada said, yeah, and he turned toward them, and he said, but if you associate with these women, you'll go back to Godhead.
Ah, very good.
So, I mean, you know.
You know what this reminds me of is the wives of the Brahmanas in the 10th canto.
Right.
That the Brahmins were so busy performing the sacrifice that they didn't have any time for Krishna and Balaram when they came up and said, hey, we're here to take the offerings. And they just were too busy with the rituals.
Right.
But the wives of the Brahmanas.
So that says it all. And Prabhupada in that statement, I think, defeats all the other inconsistent, maybe, discussions that have been going on. So I just wanted to share that story.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you for that. Yeah.
Hare Krishna. My name is Shudi Das, and I was thinking of a couple of things while you were talking. Maybe you can elaborate on those. These things that I've read help me in dealing with others. One is, Prabhupada says that if a person is sick and they go in the pharmacy, the medicine you need is there, but it won't help you until you've been diagnosed with what the disease is. And the second one I always try to remember before I speak is the austerity of speech. Is it truthful, pleasing, beneficial, palatable, and based on scripture? So maybe you can elaborate on how we can use things like that to help us deal with others.
Well, the first one was what exactly?
Prabhupada says that a person may be sick and goes into the pharmacy, and the medicine that you need to cure yourself is in the pharmacy, but it won't do you any good until you find out what your disease is.
Yeah. Prabhupada gives us innumerable, analogies to explain things. And I think this is a very helpful thing to use. And I'm sure many of us already use those. But I'm not sure, are you relating even what you're saying here to the previous comment on...
No, I'm relating it to how you were talking about dealing with people and finding out about them.
Oh.
If you find out about them, then you can give them proper
Okay.
instructions afterwards rather than just
Yes.
prescribing medicine without finding out.
That's right. Exactly. To be insensitive to others and to give them the prescription of Krishna Bhakti without even hearing, without examining who they are, where they're coming from, what they long for, is to be like a doctor giving you a prescription before he even examines the patient. So I like that. I like that very much. Prabhupada gives us a lot of very helpful analogies, and we should take advantage of it, just as you're suggesting, I think. I wanted to say one more thing to Vaikuntha Priya's comment. Women's voices in this movement have not had the opportunity to be heard the way they should have been. And I have been around a long enough time to know that women have gotten sort of a second place at times. I have encouraged women from 1976 on to give Bhagavatam class, to learn how to give class. Not that every woman should, every man shouldn't either. And I hope my wife's not listening to this right now, because I think she may not like this, but I have to tell you, I'm very proud of the first, thanks for the sprinkle. I did take a shower this morning, however. Okay, I have to mention that for the first time in the history of the Gaudiya Vaishnava movement, women's voices, Vaishnavi voices from around the world, in a collection of poetry, is being put together in a book. And women's voices have never been collected like this in a book ever before in the history of the movement. So this is something she's producing. She's got about 108 contributions from Vaishnavi women, bhaktas, and it'll be out in a few months. So it's the first time, again, and I think more projects need to be done like this. The world needs the voice of the feminine. Women's studies. I was at Harvard at a time when women's studies came into vogue, and it wasn't just like a bunch of women trying to take over men's positions. What they found was that women actually can convey a part of history that men won't convey. So, for example, when they did studies on the Holocaust, they found that men would talk about certain things, but not other things. But the women would talk about other things. The intelligence of a woman and the intelligence of a man are required to raise a child. Hello. Most of us, I think, had mothers and fathers. I mean, I think that's a fair assumption. And we need the intelligence of a mother and a father It's absolutely required. And a lack of that, we suffer. So the movement needs mothers and fathers in really expounding more upon the experiences we have in the tradition. So this is again another frontier that needs to be pushed forward. And watch for this collection of poetry. It's really quite a beautiful project. I hope you're not listening, sweetheart. Yeah. Oh.
Any other Matajis have a comment or question?
Thank you, Prabhuji. Yeah, my name is Chandra. Thank
Chandra.
you, Prabhuji, for yeah.
Like this.
Okay, yeah. So my comment, it's not a question, a comment on the use of word expansion. I feel the word is not wrong, it is right. Same way like say a gas in a container or compressed anywhere can, or even if not fully compressed, can expand to fill the whole space. Krishna can expand himself to be available everywhere and in all the gopis.
Yes.
So
yes.
I personally feel the word is right, expansion word.
Oh, I am not saying the word is wrong.
No.
You
had clarified that you gave the analogy of Krishna multiplying himself into many to be available to all
duplicating
the
himself multiple times to each and every gopi.
So I would say that he need not have, that division is not required or multiplication is not required. Krishna can expand the same way as gas can expand and fill all the rooms, the whole space.
Yes.
So the word is right. That's what is my point.
I agree.
Thank you.
Hi, Prabhu. Thank you so much. Probably about the point that you raised about the setting of the emerald, right?
Yes.
Meaning our behavior, and we shouldn't like throw the Gita at people, in a challenging way. How would you do it when you see an offensive mentality by Mayavadis? In different spectrum of Mayavadis, from New Age hippies to scholars, right? Who downgrade bhakti into the sentimental level. That Krishna, the Supreme, cannot be a coward boy with bare feet running around. You know what you're talking about, right? And they look at
I love it when they say that.
And they look at it in a downgrading way. You know how not to like throw shastra at those people to defeat them. How to control. What's the correct course of action to take.
Yeah. Well, there's no set formula, so I'm not going to give you that. But when we articulate this Krishna Bhakti vision in a way that is sophisticated, now it depends on exactly to whom we're speaking. But if it's another scholar, I think that it's important that we can present Krishna Bhakti theology in a very beautiful fashion. In other words, Christian theology has had centuries of explication and illumination. We need to at least match them in English with the kind of sophistication that they would expect. So, for example, recently, Georgetown University, the scholars there in the theology department have invited me to come up and explain Krishna Bhakti to them in a kind of interfaith dialogue, interreligious theological exploration. So they're calling me because I've got all that intellectual stuff. That's a very rarefied context. Not everyone, no one's going to come up to most devotees here on the street and say, we need, an incredibly heavy-duty intellectual explanation of Krishna Bhakti. At the same time, we should have that. Now, Prabhupada said, it's fairly well known, and if Rameshwar, I don't see him here, preach according to your, oh, there you are. Rameshwarji, Prabhupada said, preach according to your realization, didn't he? I mean, he did say, it's well known, right? Okay. So, no one's asking anyone here to do what they can't do. If a scholar stops you on the street and say, look, I need to know, what are the sort of ontological explanations, and the teleological explanations, and the epistemological explanations of your philosophy? Well, here, take a book. You could do that. But you could also say, well, there are scholars who could address these issues. And then there may be someone, comes up to me and says, so what are you guys doing about some really cool music? I say, well, I could dance a little for you. No one's going to want to see me dance, believe me. Trust me. But I could send them to people who are doing that. No one devotee is supposed to know, specialize in everything. So we have specializations. We've got talented movie makers here. We've got talented artists. We've got talented book distributors. We've got talented devotees who live the life of Krishna Bhakti, who are ready to share it. There are all kinds of angles. We have a technologist. Okay, biotechnologist, did I have that right? Okay, so from her angle, she can also explain. She's not a theologian, I'm a theologian. But from her angle, she can have some special angles of offering the gifts that Prabhupada gave. So when Prabhupada said, preach according to your realization, I really think we should take that seriously. Once I remember in the Chicago temple, when I was down at the University of Chicago, usually I would, just for fun, I would answer the temple's requests that they would get from universities around the area for, presentations on Krishna Bhakti. And that's when I would get out of my regular clothes and get into these and take some devotees along and take a harmonium and, just, right, have fun. And of course, they would always introduce me with my academic accolades or whatever, which, could help in that context. But really, I came as a devotee. Well, one time I couldn't make it. So I asked a devotee, would you be willing to go and do this for me? So he went, and the next morning at Mangala Arati afterwards, I asked him, so how did it go? He said, it went terribly. I said, it went terribly? I've gone there before and talked in his class. So how did it go? He said, I started out by saying the Bhagavad Gita was written 5,000 years ago, and he immediately stopped me and said, no, Bhagavad Gita was not written 5,000 years ago. And we argued the whole hour. I said, OMG. We didn't have that expression back then, but something like that. And I said, you should have told them that if the Gita were written yesterday, it would still be so powerful to transform people's lives. Why did you go along with that? And you're not a scholar to argue back and forth the historicity of the Gita. That's not your job. So you see, that was a failure. He should never have devoted his whole class to argue back and forth. So that's what we're here to do. Look, as a teacher, one thing I've learned, the best teacher is the one who teaches what they love. Give the students what you love. You'll never fail as a teacher. Yeah. Well, he's the only one who liked it, so that's good. No, I don't. No, we don't need.
Those are the accolades he was talking.
Yeah, right.
Are there any Prabhupada disciples who want to share today their memories? Because we have about 10 minutes before Garuda's presentation. that. Otherwise, I'm going to press, do a full court press to squeeze 10 more minutes out of Garuda.
Oh boy.
So, is there any? Raise your hand if you want to do your Prabhupada sharing. Prabhupada sharing, not questions for Garuda. Prabhupada sharing.
So we have it.
2. Okay. So in that case, on behalf of all the Vaishnavas, I want to, both here and online, I want to give my tremendous gratitude for your coming all the way here. Enduring a grilling at times.
Yes.
And sharing your realizations. Let's hear it for Garudaji. So we will.
I'm now released.
But he's released to you. Now you can approach him on that one-on-one level that he was talking about. He's so good at, that intimate. We'll get into it together, heart to heart. That's your job now. You have him for the rest of the festival for that. No, don't. Happy. There. So we're going to have a couple of shares, and then we're going to have Bhargava's presentation. Please stand up. No, just sit down. It's okay. The microphone's there. This mic's not working.
Hare Krishna. I'm very pleased by all the devotees, as from the moment I met devotees, they gave me good fortune. Somebody tried to sell me incense, I refused. About a week later, on Sunday morning, I was looking in a little newspaper, and I saw Radha Krishna temple. And I had felt bad about rejecting the devotee because he had shaved his head, and at that time that was a sign of not being cool or something. So I thought he wasn't after something from me. He was doing something higher. And I went to the temple and began serving. And 16 months later, doing a lot of book Back to Godhead distribution and small book distribution primarily, and regular program following and all that, Srila Prabhupada was coming to Atlanta. And I had realized long before, all throughout, that this was the absolute truth, and I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to stick with it, whatever it takes. And then we all went to the airport. I don't remember if we went in the big buses, but 5 of them were there. The Radha Damodar party was all there. We went to the airport, maybe 75 devotees in the terminal, and we were all chanting happily, anticipating Prabhupada to walk out into our view. And then he came out, and everybody bowed down, hit the floor. And I quickly got up because I wanted to see him. I'd been serving, so I thought, let me see. And Prabhupada stopped, put his hand on his cane, and immediately became like brilliant gold. And that spread, the effulgence of Prabhupada spread through the room. And he looked over the devotees and the room with pleasing expression on his face. And then it all went whoosh, and he walked on as an elderly Indian sannyasi. So I realized he's got it. And I'm always curious to know who that devotee was who I turned to, and I said, did you see Prabhupada's effulgence, how it went right into him? And the devotee said, I sure did. So beyond effulgence, Prabhupada does everything great. By the way, this is Krishna's microphone. We don't want the cord to get wrecked. There we go. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. That's Hamza Gati Prabhu. When did you join, Hamza Gati? What year? Hamza Gati, what year did you join?
September
1973. Shruti, you had raised your hand? And then you have about 4 minutes.
Bhakti Namini Namaste Saraswati Devi.
When did you join,
Shruti?
Shruti?
Pacharni Nivasesha Shunyavati Pastacha Dasatarni. January 5th, 1970.
1970.
I'll try to tell a few stories quickly. It's amazing how we see that Prabhupada can reach us through other devotees, because the first time I heard chanting was at, I went to see a music festival a couple of years ago. What was 1967? Well, that's more than a couple of years ago. And the people were chanting, and I said, where did this come from? They said it was a Swami named Prabhupada was speaking at the temple on Pico Boulevard, which is 2 before this one. And I chanted with them, and the next week a friend of mine was shooting at animals, and he squished a bird with a rock. And I said, that's a cruel thing to do. He says, well, you eat meat, don't you? I said, yes. He said, so is it any worse for me to kill one more bird? I said, you're right, I'll never eat it again. So I saw that by chanting with them, which they had gotten through Prabhupada, I was able to take a step towards Krishna, and he took 10 towards me. So I started coming to the temple in January 1970 when I was still in high school, and came up here to see Srila Prabhupada. Only have a few minutes, so I'll just tell a few quick stories. And it was the temple on La Cienega then, and I remember I went to Jai